What's up, everybody? Welcome to our second YouTube video on this channel, and today we're going to talk about why the church is segregated. And it's sort of crazy because the church, like the original model of the church in the early days after Jesus' resurrection, was really the institution that started to say for the first time that skin color, being a man, being a woman, being rich, being poor, really didn't matter. That we could all be a part of this movement together, this thing called the Jesus movement. And now, fast forward 2,000 years later, and the last place, well, maybe not the last place, but the place that segregation has the biggest hold on our society, at least in the South, is in the church. So have you ever thought, like, why is that? So some ideas are this, that maybe the church, some people might say that Christians are the problem. And they would point to examples like what's like the child sex abuse stuff in the Catholic Church, or they would point to churches in the South, or maybe all over, that are still the last places where segregation holds on. And some people would say that maybe the church is the problem and we should just leave it behind. And so I just want to dig into for a few minutes how we got here. Like, how is it that the thing that is responsible in many ways for us looking at the world and saying that all people have this like spark, this being made in the image of God, black, white, or whatever, this movement, this Jesus movement, which is responsible for that idea, how the church, who we claim like to be the place, the people who spread that message into the world, is now the place where segregation exists the most. And so, like in North America, where we are, man, like we can't really go back to a time when it was any different. Since the founding of America, it's always been segregated. Churches that were started have been segregated. And so now, like, we're here, and so we can like ask, why is it? And so one answer could be this, that maybe the Christians in America are racist. So maybe that's a possibility. And so some people would say that also about black churches, that maybe they're racist and they don't like white people. Well, I don't think you can really go there because, and the black churches that are founded, the historically black churches, they didn't really have a choice. There were established churches of like Europeans, white people, and they were not allowed to participate in those back in the day. Or if they were allowed to participate, they had to sit in the balcony or they had to sit in their separate section, and they were segregated within the church, which just can't feel right as you like read through the New Testament and you look at the Jesus message. So eventually they said, we need to have a place where we can teach and where we can fellowship and be together, and they started their own churches. And so like those are the reasons those historically black churches started. And it's like anything else, once something gets going, it just sort of keeps going that way. And so that's why they're still there. So we can't really point our fingers at the historically black churches. We could point our fingers at the historically white churches, and we could say, man, it's your fault. And so you might say, well, the people in those churches are racist now. And I'm sure there are some people in churches that are racist. But I don't think it's fair to say, like, that's the problem. That's the reason why. Like the individual, like if you close your eyes and point to a random person in a white people church, there's got to be a better name, but you know what I mean. If you close your eyes and point to a random person in a church that you know of that's predominantly white, and you say they're racist, well, I mean, I guess they could be, but maybe not. But what has happened is, like, as a culture, and this goes for all kind of stuff, we inherit the sins of our fathers, or we inherit the sins of our forefathers and our great-grandfathers and our great-great-grandfathers. And it's complicated. But Jesus said that, you know, your sins sort of go down to the second and third generations, and that's true. And so what people say is, we're not racist, we just happen to be a white church. No, time out. I've heard Christians say that like birds of a feather flock together. That's not in the Bible. And I've heard them use stuff out of the Old Testament like don't intermarry, which is not talking about race. It's talking about don't intermarry with people who have like other gods. And so they do, like there are people that think races should be separated, which is totally unbiblical, and I wish they would just take the name church off their organization, because that's not a Jesus movement idea. They're like taking the Jesus movement, the name of the church, and like dragging it through the mud. But there's a lot of people in churches, in white churches, in black churches today that would say, man, we're not racist, it's just the way it is. Well, here's a problem. Because it's just the way it is and churches are segregated, it makes it really easy for people all over to look at the church and say, y'all are fake. It makes it really easy in a world that values inclusion, that values desegregation, that values integration. And the reason they value it is because of the Jesus movement. They don't know that, but that's fine. In a culture that really values integration, whenever our churches are segregated, it ruins the testimony of the church. And many people won't give the Jesus movement, they won't even hear it out because they see that churches are places that still hold on to some of the sins of our fathers. And we look down on certain people, maybe that we yell at certain people, and today we're talking about that our churches are segregated. And so if you're an individual person in a church and you say, I'm not racist, this so happens that our church is all one race or another, I'm not saying you're racist. What I am saying is that just not being racist isn't good enough. There's like momentum coming from the past. We live in the South. I live in the South. I live in South Carolina if you're watching this from somewhere else. We have the momentum. We have like the weight of our history, the weight of what's happened here for the last 300 years. It's not just me and it's not just now. The weight of the past comes into the future and affects where we're at. And sometimes just not being bad isn't good enough. Not being bad isn't good enough. What's called for is for us to do something and atone for the sins of the past. It's like when you do wrong. Doing wrong and saying I'm sorry is a really good idea, but doing wrong and saying I'm sorry is not good enough. You obviously need to mean it, but if you're really sorry, doing wrong and saying you're sorry, what follows up is you need to do anything you can to rectify your sins. You need to do anything you can to rectify, to make it right, to put it right, to fix what you... So if you stole something, you need to pay for it or return it plus something. And so, like if our cultural sin of slavery and now segregation is not good enough just to say we're sorry and we won't do it again. As the church, I think it's our job to do something about rectifying the situation. It's our job to pay the price. It's our job to actively seek resolution, to go after a solution that will show the world, man, the church is not the place that segregation belongs in. And so that's how we're here. That's the reason churches are segregated is not because every person in them is racist. It's because we live in a culture that was defined by segregation. And the churches are in some ways the institutions that really almost from generation to generation interlock more than anything else. And so what's happened in previous generations is this sort of carried on. And white churches have stayed white churches, and black churches have stayed black churches. Not because the people now are racist, because it's just the way it was, and it's just sort of carried over, and like families have kept going there. And so us just saying we're not racist, and us just saying we're sorry, and us just saying we love everybody is not good enough. We need to do whatever we can to fix and restore the reputation of the church. And when it comes to race relations, that means that, man, we need to actively pursue integration in our churches. And we need to actively pursue bringing people in of different backgrounds. We need to actively pursue our churches looking a lot like our communities as a whole, not little segments of our communities. It goes for black and white. It goes for Hispanic. It goes for rich and poor. If you're a church full of rich people, then we need to actively pursue inviting people that aren't like us, if for no other reason than for the reputation of the church. Because I believe that the church is the thing that God's called through the story of the cross and through the story of the resurrection to turn communities upside down, to change the world. But how can we expect people to take us seriously and for us to change the world when they look at the church and they see that's the last place that's holding on to segregation? No wonder they say, I don't want anything to do with that. So maybe saying we're not bad is not good enough anymore. Maybe as a church, we're going to have to actively pursue integration. That means we need to invite our friends of other colors and other races and other ethnic groups and other socioeconomic groups to fellowship with us and to do life with us and to come eat at our house and to be a part of our community and to be a part of our churches and for us to be a part of their community. And man, so that not so that we can brag about how good we are, but so that the reputation of the church, the bride of Christ, so the reputation of the bride can be restored, and so that we can see changed people change our world. Okay, that's video number 2. Hopefully it was better than video number 1, but not as good as video number 3 is going to be. So stay tuned for that, guys. Hope to see you soon. And let's do something about this. If you're a part of the church, if you're a part of the Jesus movement, let's do everything we can to integrate our churches. Not to prove that you're not racist, but let's do everything we can to integrate our churches, because, man, if our culture looks at our churches and writes off the Jesus movement because of segregation, then how can we stand by and do nothing about that? We've got to do something. And plus, first off, black, white, rich, poor, Hispanic, whatever. Man, if they're Jesus people, they're your brothers and sisters, and we ought to show off what the future in Jesus is going to look like. In the future, like heaven, the new heavens, the new earth is not going to be segregated. So we might as well go ahead and start looking that way now. See you later.